A man stands on his own front lawn in Ashburn, Virginia, holding a piece of paper he doesn't understand. It's his electric bill, and the number at the bottom is bigger than last month. It was bigger the month before that, too. He hasn't bought a new appliance, he hasn't had a baby, or a heat wave, or a house guest who never leaves. He runs the same dishwasher, the same air conditioner, the same string of porch lights he's run for years. Nothing in his life uses more power than it did, and yet the bill keeps climbing. His name is Jatinder Chandok, and above his house, stretching across the whole neighborhood, run the high-voltage power lines. Thick black cables, slung between steel towers, humming a low electric hum day and night. He looks up at them, then down at the paper in his hand, and he says something to a room full of regulators that I want you to hold on to for the next 20 minutes. He says, "My power needs are already being met, so let the data center industry pay for this." Not the families living under the power lines, the data center industry. Hold that thought, because if you're watching this, there's a good chance you've felt exactly what Jatinder felt. That quiet confusion when the bill arrives and the number doesn't match your life. You didn't change anything, so why are you paying more? Here's what most people miss. The answer has almost nothing to do with you. You are not using more electricity. You are not being wasteful. You did not leave the lights on. The reason your bill keeps going up is sitting in a giant windowless building somewhere you've probably never driven past, a building with no employees to speak of, drawing more power than an entire town, running the artificial intelligence that everyone says is going to change the world. And here's the strange part. You never agreed to pay for it, but quietly, line by line, you already are. This is not a story about you using more power. This is not a story about one bad winter. This is not a story about greedy meter readers skimming a few dollars off the top. This is a story about the most expensive technology in human history and the quiet decision, made in rooms you'll never sit in, about who gets handed the bill for building it. By the end of this video, you'll understand 3 things. You'll understand exactly why your bill is rising, even though your usage isn't. You'll understand who's actually profiting while you pay. And this is the part that matters. You'll understand what you can actually do about it. Because here's the thing nobody leads with. This fight is already being won. In places you'd never expect. By ordinary people who did one small thing. But to get there, we have to start with a number that broke a record 3 times in a single year, and almost nobody noticed. Before we get to the number, meet Linda Clark. Linda lives in Reynoldsburg, Ohio, just outside Columbus. She's retired. She lives on a fixed income, which is a polite way of saying the money coming in does not change, no matter what the world does to the cost of things. This past summer, she opened her electric bill, and the word she used to describe it was simple, a shocker. Now, Linda is careful. She's the kind of person who turns the lights off when she leaves a room, who knows exactly what her budget can take. So when the bill jumped, she did what you would do. She wondered what she'd done wrong. And the answer, the same as it was for Jatinder, is nothing. She'd done nothing wrong. To understand what really happened to Linda's bill, and to yours, you have to understand one thing about electricity that almost nobody explains. You don't just pay for the power you use. You also pay to keep power ready. Think about it like this. The electric grid can't run out, not even for a second. On the hottest afternoon in August, when every air conditioner in the state is screaming at once, the grid has to deliver, instantly, perfectly, or the whole thing goes dark. So the people who run the grid pay power plants in advance just to promise they'll be standing by on that worst day. It's like paying a firefighter to sit at the station even when there's no fire. You're not paying for the water, you're paying for the readiness. And here's where it gets technical. But stay with me because this is the whole story. The way they decide how much that readiness costs is an auction. Once a year, in the biggest grid region in America, a region called PJM that stretches from Chicago to the Atlantic and covers 65 million people, power plants bid to be the ones kept on standby. The price they all land on is called the capacity price. And every household in that region, including Linda's, pays a slice of it on every single bill. For years, that price was boring, sleepy, the kind of number only an energy nerd could love. And then, in one auction, it didn't just rise. It detonated. The price of keeping backup power on standby went from $28.92 per megawatt day to $269.92. That's almost a tenfold jump in 1 year across the whole region, which means the total bill for that standby power exploded from $2.2 billion to $14.7 billion. Pay attention to this, because here's the question that matters. What changed? People didn't suddenly start using 10 times more electricity. The weather didn't get 10 times hotter. So what drove a sleepy number through the roof? You don't have to take my word for it, because PJM, the grid operator, has an independent referee, a watchdog firm called Monitoring Analytics, whose entire job is to keep the market honest. They are not activists, they are not on anyone's side. And they ran the numbers on what caused the spike. Their answer: data centers were behind about 63% of it, roughly $9.3 billion in extra cost, and every dollar of it gets recovered from customers like Linda, like Jatender, like you. So here's what actually happened to Linda Clark's bill. A wave of enormous new buildings, full of computer chips, told the grid they were coming and they would need staggering amounts of power. The grid had to promise enough standby capacity to cover them. That promise got expensive, and the cost of that promise landed on the bill of a retired woman in Ohio who has never used an AI chatbot in her life. There's a name for the reason her bill can rise, even when her usage doesn't move at all. It's called your peak load contribution, your share of the grid's worst moment. When the price of covering that worst moment goes up, your bill goes up. You didn't flip a single switch. The math just changed around you. But it gets stranger, because the auction is only the part they let you see. The bigger transfer is happening somewhere else entirely, in a loophole most people have never heard of, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. So let's catch our breath for 1 second, because we've already uncovered something big. Your bill is rising, your usage isn't, and a neutral referee hired to keep the grid honest has put the blame on a wave of new buildings that you and I never asked for and don't profit from. If that already makes you want to know what to do about it, hang on, because the most useful part of this whole video is coming near the end. The part where I show you the free ally fighting for your bill that almost nobody knows exists, and the one small thing ordinary people are doing that's actually turning this around. If a channel like this is new to you, this is exactly what we do here. Take the confused machinery behind your money and make it make sense. Subscribing is free, and it tells the algorithm to show this to one more person who's staring at a bill they don't understand. And while you're at it, I want you to do something. Look at your last few electric bills. Has the number crept up even when your life didn't change? Keep that in your head, because in a moment you'll know exactly why. Now, the loophole. When a new data center wants to plug into the grid, it can't just flip a switch. The grid has to be upgraded to handle it. New high-voltage lines, new substations, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars of steel and copper, built across the countryside just to feed one cluster of buildings. So here's the fair question. Who should pay for those upgrades? The data center that needs them, or you? You already know the answer, don't you? In 2024, across 7 states in the PJM region, utilities approved about $4.3 billion in transmission upgrades, specifically to connect data centers, and in over 95% of those projects, the entire cost was not charged to the data centers. It was spread across everyone, folded quietly into the bills of millions of ordinary households who will never set foot inside those buildings. The Union of Concerned Scientists has a name for this. They call it the connection cost loophole. A senior analyst there, a man named Mike Jacobs, has spent his career inside the machinery of the grid, and even he describes it as a quiet transfer, costs created by one customer, paid by all the others. In Virginia alone, that loophole shifted nearly $2 billion onto people like Jatinder Chandok, who stood under those power lines and said out loud the thing the whole system seems designed to ignore. Let the industry that needs this pay for it. Here's the part nobody tells you. This is the real engine of the story, and it has a name in economics. It's called cost socialization, and on its own it isn't evil. It's the principle the entire grid was built on. We all share the cost of the wires, because we all share the benefit of the power. That's the deal. That's the promise. Everyone pays in, everyone gets light. But watch what happens when you break that deal in half. When one party causes the cost, but a different party gets the benefit. The data center causes the need for billions in new infrastructure. You pay for it. But the profit from what runs inside that building, the AI models, the cloud contracts, the soaring stock price, that flows to the technology companies and their shareholders. The gains are private, the costs are public. Privatized gains, socialized costs. Once you learn that phrase, you will start to see it everywhere. And if this pattern feels familiar, it should, because we have done this before. In 1848, a man named Samuel Brannan heard there was gold in the rivers of California. He didn't grab a pan and start digging. He did something smarter. He quietly bought up every pickaxe, every shovel, every tin pan in San Francisco, and then he ran through the streets holding a vial of gold dust, shouting that there was gold in the hills. The rush began. Thousands of people poured in to dig, and Samuel Brannan sold them the shovels, at one point making the equivalent of thousands of dollars a day. He became the first millionaire of the gold rush, and he never dug a single hole. That's the thing about a gold rush. The people who get rich aren't usually the ones with the picks, they're the ones selling the picks. In the AI rush, the diggers are the tech companies, and the ones selling the shovels, the chips, the servers, the cloud space are getting staggeringly rich. But there's a third group in every gold rush that the story forgets: the town, the ordinary people who live there before the gold, who watch their rent and their bread and their water get more expensive because 1,000 prospectors showed up overnight. Nobody asked them if they wanted a gold rush. They just got the bill. In this story, you are the town. Now, I want to be honest with you, because honesty is the only reason you should trust anything else I've said. You may have seen scary headlines that power prices near data centers jumped 267%, and that number is real. Bloomberg analyzed about 25,000 points on the grid and found it. But here's the part the scary headline leaves out: that 267% is the wholesale price, the raw cost of power on the market, and that's only 30 to 50% of your actual bill. So your bill did not jump 267%. The real increase for households over 5 years was smaller, around 94% in Washington, D.C., around 42% nationwide. 42% is not 267. I could have used a scarier number. I'm not going to. Because 42% on something you cannot opt out of, on a bill you have to pay to keep your lights on and your food cold. That's plenty. That's real money leaving your pocket every month. And you deserve to know the true size of it, not the clickbait size of it. So that's where we are, a loophole that hands you the wire bill, a deal that's been quietly cut in half, a gold rush where you're the town. But here's the question that decides everything next. How big does this get? Because if you think it's bad now, wait until you see the curve. Here's the curve. In 2023, all the data centers in America used about 176 terawatt hours of electricity. That's roughly 4% of everything the entire country uses. A lot, but manageable. Now here's where it gets remarkable. The Department of Energy projects that by 2028, that number could more than triple, as high as 580 terawatt hours. Up to 12% of all the electricity in the United States poured into windowless buildings full of chips. And here is the cruel piece of math at the center of this whole story. You cannot build power that fast. A new power plant takes years. A major transmission line can take a decade, tangled in permits and lawsuits and steel. But a data center? A company can throw one up in about 2 years. So the demand arrives like a flood, and the supply trickles in like a leaky tap. And when demand races that far ahead of supply, there is only one thing left that can move quickly enough to close the gap. Not the number of power plants, the price. That's why the capacity auction didn't just spike once. It hit its ceiling, the absolute maximum the rules allow, 3 separate times in a row. By the end of 2025, a single auction cleared at a record cap and rang up a total of about $16.4 billion. The referee, monitoring analytics, looked at all the new demand that had piled in between auctions and found that 94% of it came from one source, data centers. Not you, not Linda, not the town, them. So that's the fear. A curve bending almost straight up, and a bill that compounds every single year, with no natural ceiling in sight. Now, take a breath, because this is the exact moment the story turns. And it turns on a single, stunning piece of research out of Duke University. The researchers asked a simple question. What if the data centers didn't have to run flat out every second of every day? What if, on the few worst hours of the year, the handful of brutal afternoons when the grid is gasping, they simply eased off, powered down a little, leaned on their own batteries for a moment? The engineers have a term for this. They call it flexible load. A big customer that can dial itself back for a short stretch when the grid is under strain. And here is what Duke found. If data centers agreed to flex their power for as little as 0.5% of the year, that's it, half of 1%, the existing American grid could absorb up to 126 gigawatts of brand new demand, with no new power plants at all. Let that land. We were told this required trillions in new construction. We were told it was the thing driving your bill toward the sky. But a huge slice of it could be handled by the grid we already have. If the giants simply agreed to bend, just a little on the worst days, the crisis was never really about a lack of power. It was about a lack of fairness and a lack of flexibility. And both of those are choices, which means both of those can change, and they are changing. Remember Jatinder Chandok standing under the power lines, telling the regulators to make the industry pay instead of the families. For a long time, that was just one man's voice at a podium. But listen to what happened next. In Virginia, the data center capital of the world, the regulators wrote a brand new rule, a special class just for the giant power users. Under it, a data center has to sign a contract for 14 years. It has to pay for the capacity at reserves, whether it uses it or not, and it has to put down collateral, about $1.5 million for every megawatt it asks for, before a single shovel hits the ground. In plain English, Virginia just told the data centers to pay their own way. The exact thing Jatinder asked for, out loud, under those humming lines. The system finally turned around and answered him. Yes, this is not a story about a number on a bill anymore. This is not a story about one retiree in Ohio or one homeowner in Virginia. This is not a story about the machines. This is a story about a 100-year-old promise that everyone who pays into the grid is supposed to benefit from it, and a fight happening right now to make that promise true again. And for the first time, the people under the power lines are starting to win. So let's talk about you, because the whole point of understanding a problem is to do something with it. Here's the first thing, and it's the one almost nobody knows. In most states, there is a person whose entire government-funded job is to fight rate hikes on your behalf. They're called a consumer advocate or a ratepayer council. In Ohio, it's the Office of the Consumers Council. In other states, it goes by other names. You already pay for them. Most people have no idea they exist. Look yours up tonight, and you'll have a professional in your corner you didn't know you had. Here's the second thing. When a utility wants to raise your rates, it has to ask permission in something called a rate case, and by law, that case is open to public comment. You, yes you, with no lawyer and no expertise, can submit a single paragraph to your utility commission saying this cost should fall on the data centers, not on families. Regulators will tell you plainly, one letter feels like nothing, but multiplied across a state, those comments move decisions. That is not a fantasy. It's exactly what helped push the new rules through in Ohio and in Georgia, where regulators froze residential rates through 2028 while the data centers boomed. And you are not a lonely voice doing this. In just 1 year, more than 60 bills to protect ordinary ratepayers were filed across 22 states. 34 states have already created special rules to make giant power users pay their own way. The tide is turning, state by state, and it's turning because people noticed. The third thing is the one you can do before you finish your coffee tomorrow. Call your utility, or check their website, and ask if you can switch to a time-of-use plan. Power is cheaper at night and on weekends when the grid is quiet. Move your laundry, your dishwasher, your car charging to after 9 at night. And you can shave real money off the bill without giving up a single thing you care about. So let me leave you with 3 things to carry out of here. First, the truth. Your bill is rising not because of anything you did, but because of a hidden auction and a quiet loophole that turned millions of ordinary households into the silent sponsors of the AI boom. Now you know the machine. You can't be fooled by it anymore. Second, the part that's yours. You are not powerless in this. The ratepayer council, the public comment, the time of use plan. Those levers are real, they are mostly free, and they are sitting there waiting for you to pull them. And third, the part I really want you to feel. The electric grid was the great shared promise of the last century. Everyone pays in, and everyone gets the light. That promise is being tested right now by the most powerful companies on Earth. But promises don't get broken by machines. They get broken when people stop paying attention, and they get kept when people start. Somewhere tonight, a woman named Maya is sitting at her kitchen table. She reads her bill, she switches her plan, and she clicks one button to submit a comment to her state. It takes her 4 minutes. It feels like almost a nothing, but she's not alone. She's one of millions, quietly deciding that the promise is worth keeping. That's how this turns. Not with a machine, with you. Here's my question for you, and I genuinely want to know. Has your electric bill jumped in the last 2 years, and is there a data center being built anywhere near you? Tell me in the comments, I read them. And I think a lot of us are about to realize we're in the same story. If this made the machine behind your money make a little more sense, subscribe, because that's the only thing we do here. Take care of yourself, watch your bill, and I'll see you in the next one.